Good evening, everyone, and it is an absolute honour and privilege to provide the after-dinner address. Firstly, to those of you who are new to Perth or Australia, I'd like to thank you very, very much for making such a very, very, very long trip to come to Perth, Western Australia. Some of you may have noticed that as Australians we do have a few unusual quirks, and one of the big ones is that we love sport. We love sport so much that we basically play pretty much all the sports in the world, and we even made up one ourselves. So we have a sport called Australian Rules Football. An American friend once described the game to me as a game where you get an oval, you get 4 sticks at either end of the oval, you get 36 players, you throw a rugby-shaped ball in the middle, and then people fight and wrestle for the next 3 hours. And I think that's a pretty accurate description to the untrained eye. Another strange quirk that Australians have is that we like to abbreviate things. If you want to take a beautiful train trip down to the port city of Fremantle, we don't call it Fremantle, we call it Freo. Likewise, if you want to take a nice day trip out to Rottnest Island to see the quokkas, we don't call it Rottnest Island, we call it Rotto. We even shorten breakfast to brekkie, and McDonald's becomes Macca's. So look, if there's any confusion for anyone who's visiting Australia and you feel that we're not properly communicating, I would like to apologise on behalf of Australians for that. But one thing that I think is really important when it comes to what Australians are and what we stand for is the nature of what we call a fair go. A fair go is not about achieving the top of something. It's not about becoming the Prime Minister. It's not about climbing Everest. It's not about achieving something beyond everyone else. The nature of a fair go means that you are able to achieve the everyday. It might be that you're able to get a good job, which is an important theme for this conference. It's about getting a good pay for a good day's work. It's about being able to own your own home. It's about being able to grow up in a society that supports and respects you. And it's really about that fair go that I want to talk about this evening. In terms of my childhood, I was very fortunate to grow up in a pretty typical middle class home, not too far away from here. And as a kid, I had a nice home, parents that loved me, and I was very well supported. In fact, one of the happiest memories I have was when I had a special hero come to my house when I was 5. On Channel 7 there is a station mascot called Fat Cat that even to today says goodnight to children at 7:30 each night. So you can imagine my surprise when there was a knock at the door one day and I opened the door and Fat Cat is standing there in front of my house, come over to play with me. And as a 5-year-old, this is like my hero, and it's a very, very happy, special memory for me. The only problem was the next day I went to kindergarten, there's those abbreviations. It was, I was at the kindy and I was talking to the teachers about Fat Cat coming to my house, and the teachers immediately put me in the naughty corner because they believed I was lying. And it was only until my mum got the photos developed that it was actually proof that Fat Cat did indeed come to my house. And I'm sure this had nothing to do with my uncle working for Channel 7 at the time. So, well, for the most part, my childhood was a very happy one. But it was a difficult time for my parents, because not long after that, I was diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa. And from the point of view of my parents, this was a difficult time. It wasn't difficult because things had changed overnight, because I was still a pretty happy, outgoing 5-year-old. Nothing had changed immediately. But the specialist basically said that your son will go blind almost straight away. He'll need to go to a special school, and his employment prospects are almost nil. And this was very difficult for my parents. It was difficult, again, not because things had changed for me at that time, but because it felt like the fair go for their child had been taken away. My parents, being primary school teachers, took me to another specialist who got a second opinion. And the specialist said, look, we don't really know what the future holds, so let's just take it as it comes. And it's fair to say that not only am I very grateful for that second opinion, but at the end of the day, it meant that that hope and fair go had been restored for my family. Growing up, I discovered a love for computers, and one of the things that I really enjoyed was using a Commodore 64. And I had a software program called the Software Automated Mouth, or SAM. It's probably the first time I discovered that computers could talk. I could type in some messages and it would read things out to me. Now, I will admit that the messages were pretty, the way it read things out was pretty clunky and chunky for the day. And the best thing about it was that you could get it to read out its own demo, at which point you bragged about how awesome software it was. in this demo. But what I thought was amazing about that was that not only could a computer talk to me, but they'd managed to stuff that entire program into 39K of memory, which even by today's standards is absolutely astounding. So it might be of no surprise then that after I went through primary school and high school and went to university to study computer science, I still had a love for the Commodore computer, even though it had been retired and swapped for a PC. So in the very early days of the internet in 1993, I was looking at the news groups and discussion boards about old Commodore computers. And there was a group called comp.sys.cbm. And I mention this because it's funny how sometimes little things can set trends for life. As I was reading this news group, someone posted a message saying, I have a Commodore 64 computer, I would like to put it on the internet, what do I do? The first person wrote a message going, that's very, very funny trying to get an old computer from the 1980s on the internet, that's impossible. Second person took it a little more personally and wrote back and said, look, this is a serious forum for serious committed people on the Commodore computers. Yes, they're a bit outdated now, but this is very special to us, you shouldn't make fun of us. The third post was similar to the first post. It said, yeah, that's really, really funny that you want to do that. The fourth post said, here's some basic code that creates a TCP IP stack, and here's code for a text web browser. Good luck. I remember thinking at the time, like a light bulb moment, if someone in the world can come together and work with other people to get a computer from 1982 on the internet, imagine what would happen if the world came together to try and support the needs of people with disabilities. And it was probably that first time where it really clicked to me that technology and computers was what was going to enable me and millions of other people with disability around the world that opportunity for a fair go. And it was just a really fundamental change. Later on, after uni, I worked in IT for 6 years and then returned to full-time study to do a PhD because I had this passion to want to try and make a difference in the global accessibility community. And the PhD was amazing to understand that there are so many people doing so many amazing and wonderful things, like Wayne Hawkins was saying earlier today. And it is just incredible to have got exposure to that world and to understand that there is a lot going on out there. So when I finished the PhD, I submitted my thesis hoping it would make a contribution. But I did the PhD to try to make a difference. It never occurred to me that I'd have to figure out what to do for a job afterwards with that. And it was with a lot of surprise when I was prowling around our job website here, Seek, and came across a job with a not-for-profit called Media Access Australia that was virtually my PhD in practical form as a job. So I had a chat to my wife and said, well look, there's this pretty amazing job, but it's located 4,000 kilometres away in Sydney. What do you think? And she was very, very supportive, and even though our children were 2 years old and just a few months at the time, she said, well look, I think you should give it a shot. So I uploaded my CV, and within minutes there was a phone call from the recruitment agent saying, I've just seen your CV, are you as freaked out as I am about how good a fit this job is? And I said, well, it does seem to be a really good fit. And after talking to the CEO, I then relocated the family to Sydney, and we then came back to Perth a few years later, setting up a satellite office here. What was amazing about that time was that it was in 2008, and as many of you will appreciate, 2008 was a particularly incredible year for accessibility with the launch of the W4A2017 Web Content Accessibility Guidelines version 2. And the things that happened from that point was just incredible. I think it's fair to say that the launch of WCAG 2 was the first time that the Australian government and this nation really embraced accessibility in a really cohesive, planned way. And that was a really exciting thing to see. It was really exciting to see devices come out where in 2008 the idea that there would be a mainstream commercial device that a blind person could use that had a touchscreen, I think that would have been thought laughable in 2008, appeared in 2009 in the form of the iPhone 3GS. And suddenly all things were possible. Today, when we're talking about access, we're talking about Windows, Mac, whether it's Android or iOS devices, they're packed full of accessibility features. And not only that, but they're so affordable now. If we look to eBay, we can buy $60 tablets, Android tablets on eBay, and they're usually packed with accessibility features. It's so exciting that on the consumer side, we're largely there in terms of people with disabilities having not only accessibility in device, but they also have choice. And this is indeed a wonderful, wonderful thing for today. But these devices only work if the development community supports them. And before I talk too much more about the development community, I would like to digress just a little. I've been told it is a requirement of this address to talk about something controversial. So I will endeavour to do that right now. So, look, the point I'd like to just say as part of the controversial part is that for those who aren't aware, this time zone is the most populated time zone in the world, +8 UTC. Not only are we meeting in the time zone of Perth, but we're also in the time zone of Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Hong Kong, and the big one, China. There are literally billions of people around the world who are on this time zone. It is then with a little bit of frustration that I found that to be involved in organisations like W4A2017 and ISO, I had thought when I started my job at Media Access Australia I'd have a great opportunity to actively contribute to being involved in standards. And indeed I strongly recommended that Media Access join and become a W4A2017 member, and they did. But the reality became that when you work 8 to 10 hours a day, 5 days a week, and the meetings to be part of these things are usually in the small hours of the morning here, it became quite clear that it was going to be very difficult if you have to give up a night's sleep every week to be involved in the global community, let alone do the work to make that active contribution. Last year I left Media Access Australia full-time, and I'm happy to say now that I have been able to be active participant, not just participant, as part of the Research Questions Task Force that Justin talked about earlier. And that's been a wonderful thing, to be able to actually be on these late night phone calls and contribute to web standards. I mention this because there are so many people in this region of the world that have amazing skills and talents and access, and they desperately want to contribute. I had a chat when the RQTF was first starting, and I asked some of my colleagues if they would be a part of it. I told them the meetings in Perth started at 10 PM and in Sydney they started at 1 AM. What do you think? And the response was, well, firstly, no. But secondly, if you're able to just pull that back 1 hour, we might be able to do it. So I put that to the RQTF and said, look, is there any way we can pull the meeting back an hour? And the response was, look, we would like to do that, but that would make it 8 AM in New York, and that really affects the traffic patterns in New York in trying to get to work. And the reality is, look, we're just, that would be a really difficult thing if you live in New York. So the thing I'd like to put out here tonight is to say that myself and colleagues and friends really want to make a contribution, and I'm fortunate that with my work situation now being more flexible I'm able to. But there are a lot of people, there are billions of people in this time zone, and I'm sure there are lots and lots of people around this part of the world that would love to make a contribution, but as long as the meetings are only convened for America and Europe, and to favour that time zone, it's going to be tricky. So, look, I stand ready, as do many of my friends, to have a conversation, and I don't want to just pick on W4C, and I certainly don't want to pick on individuals, but there is an issue there, and I'd very much like to be part of the solution.
From Japan. Your supporter.
But importantly, I don't want to dwell too much on the negative, because I'm largely a glass half full person, and there is so much to celebrate. One of the projects I was involved in back in 2012 was around improving social media access to support people with disability, and it was really through that project when I heard so many stories about the amazing things that the community are doing out there to try to help people with disability. And I'd just like to share 3 of those stories quickly tonight. The first, as part of the interviews I conducted, is I interviewed a woman who had a hearing impairment, and she absolutely loved Facebook. And the reason she loved Facebook was because it meant that when she had a party to go to, she was always nervous about how that would go in a noisy, crowded environment. And she found that by using Facebook to friend people before the party, for them to get to know her and vice versa, by the time the party came she was far more comfortable, and that made a really, really big difference. The second person was a blind man that was in his 50s, and he loved LinkedIn. And the reason he loved LinkedIn was because firstly he could get his CV out there, But secondly, he loved it because it meant he could join discussion forums and he could keep up with the conversations going on in his industry, so that even though he was still looking for a job, he wasn't being left behind, and that made a really, really big difference to him. But by far, the best conversation I had when it came to this project was when I asked a person with mobility impairment, what do you like best about social media? And after a pause, he said, pizza. I'm going, okay, well, why pizza? He said, well, it's like this. I have a mobility impairment, I don't drive, and I'm a lousy cook, and Domino's put great coupons on Facebook. So, cheap pizza it is. And look, this is the wonderful thing about the web, and the wonderful reason why it's such an exciting thing to be a part of. The web can be fundamental in changing and social equity. It can be about helping people find employment, as we've talked about a lot today. It can also be about watching cat videos, and it can also be about cheap pizza, and I think that is absolutely awesome. And ultimately, all these things together is what gives people with disability a fair go. But none of this would be possible if it wasn't for the dedication and the hard work of people that work in this area. And to this, I want to turn the last part of the talk to everyone here tonight. All of you, in some capacity, have dedicated your lives and your careers to trying to support the needs of people with disability. And many of you that I've spoken to have said that you're so focused on your research and your endeavour to improve things that you don't always see the outcome at the coalface. You don't always see those people with disabilities that benefit from your hard work. And what I'd like to do is just say tonight a thank you, because there are people, millions of people, which are benefiting from your hard work and your dedication, and you are the ones that give people with disability a fair go. So it's really important tonight as we leave here and as we see what's coming on with the rest of the conference, as we do look to what everyone is working on, producing, researching, analysing, that your work makes a profound and significant difference to the lives of people with disability, and that is why conferences such as this are really, really awesome, and it means a lot both professionally and personally. So thank you very much for the opportunity to give the address tonight, and please enjoy the rest of your time in Perth and the conference. Thanks everyone.